Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast.
It's great to be here.
Today we are digging into a topic that, honestly, usually makes people roll their eyes. You hear sustainability and you think compliance.
Right, expensive consultants.
Exactly. And you think, let's be real about sacrificing profit for some, vague moral high ground. It's that classic dilemma. Do I want to make money or do I want to save the world?
The old profit versus purpose debate is probably the most persistent myth in business, I think.
Well, that is exactly what we are challenging today. We're doing a deep dive into an article by Felix Römer titled Sustainability Strategy, Aligning Profit with Purpose in Business. And, looking at this through the lens of where we are right now in 2026, the main takeaway is pretty aggressive.
It is. Römer is essentially arguing that the dilemma is fake.
It's a fake dilemma.
It is, and not just in some, feel-good way. Römer's argument is that in the current economic climate, sustainability has. It's morphed. It's no longer about PR or hugging trees. It's a hardline economic necessity. If you treat it as charity, you lose. If you treat it as strategy, you win.
And that's the core claim I want to test today. Because I think a lot of our listeners, even the ones who really care about the environment, they still look at their P&L. And they see sustainability as a cost center, a tax almost. But this source material suggests that if you don't have this dialed in, you aren't just losing goodwill, you're actively bleeding value.
Exactly, or you're locking yourself out of the game entirely. Römer frames a clear sustainability strategy as a risk management tool first, and then a value driver second. It cuts costs, it drives innovation, and frankly, it's the only way to stay relevant in a market that has just completely shifted its operating logic.
Okay, so let's set the stage for this deep dive. What is our mission here?
I think we want to dismantle the idea that sustainability is a burden. We're going to look at the why, the external pressures that are forcing this. Then we'll get into the how, what a real strategy looks like versus just a slogan on a website. And finally, we'll look at execution and some examples like Netflix and Unilever.
I want to start with that pressure, because it feels like the walls have been closing in for a few years now. Why is this so unavoidable in 2026 compared to, say, 2020?
Well, it really comes down to three massive external forces. And the first one, the one you absolutely can't ignore, is the regulatory landscape.
The alphabet soup of compliance.
It really is an alphabet soup.
Yeah.
But you have to know what the letters mean now. Römer points specifically to the European framework, which has basically set the global standard.
So what are we talking about?
You've got the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. You have the ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and the EU Taxonomy.
Okay, hold on. For the listener who isn't a chief compliance officer, what's the practical impact of those acronyms? Is it just more paperwork?
No, it's audit-level scrutiny. That's the real shift. In the past, you could put a leaf on your website and say, "We are green." The CSRD changed the game. It demands that companies disclose ESG data, that's environmental, social, and governance data, with the same rigor as their financial data.
So you have to report the numbers, the methodology, all of it.
All of it. And if you lie, or if you're sloppy, it's a legal liability.
So it's like the SEC, but for carbon and labor.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it extends beyond your four walls. The article highlights supply chain laws, things like the LKSG in Germany, and the CSDDD more broadly. These are all about supply chain due diligence.
Which means you are responsible for the bad behavior of the people you buy from.
Correct. You can't just outsource your pollution or your labor rights violations anymore. If your supplier is dumping toxic waste, you are liable. This requires a level of transparency that, most companies simply didn't have 5 years ago.
Which brings me back to my skepticism. Auditing your suppliers costs money. Tracking carbon costs money. How is this not just a massive drag on the business?
Because the cost of not doing it is becoming existential. And this leads to the second driver, capital markets. This is where the rubber meets the road. Investors aren't just looking at ESG because they are nice people. They use it as a screen for risk.
So if I'm pitching a VC or going to a bank for a loan in 2026 and my ESG data is a mess, what happens?
The checkbook closes. Or, best case scenario, your cost of capital goes up. Banks view companies without a sustainability strategy as high risk.
High risk because?
You're vulnerable to climate shocks, you're vulnerable to regulatory fines, and you're vulnerable to supply chain disruptions. So you pay a higher interest rate. Simple as that.
That's a crucial distinction. It's not about woke capitalism. It's about creditworthiness.
It's pure math. And then you have the third driver, the talent war. Rumor points out that Gen Z and millennials are now the dominant force in the workforce.
And I see this constantly. Younger talent, the really high performers, they interview you.
They absolutely do. And they don't want to work for the bad guy. A clear, recognized sustainability approach is a massive recruitment tool. If you want the best engineers, the best marketers, you have to show alignment with their values.
Transparency builds trust.
Exactly. If you're opaque, they assume the worst and they go to your competitor.
Okay, so we've established the why. The regulators will fine you, the banks will charge you more, and the best talent will ignore you. That's a pretty compelling stick.
Yeah, it is.
Let's talk about the carrot. The article pivots to defining what a real sustainability strategy is. And I feel like strategy is a word that gets thrown around a lot. What separates a real one from just a PDF that sits on a server somewhere?
Rumor provides a very sharp definition here. A real strategy is a blueprint. It ties daily activities, which you actually do on a Tuesday morning, to measurable goals.
So it covers everything: operations, products, services.
It has to. It is not a side project owned by the marketing team.
So what are the nuts and bolts? If I'm building this blueprint, what actually goes in it?
It starts with goals, but not vague ones like be better. We're talking time-bound targets, often tied to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Then policies, actual rules for procurement, energy use, labor, and finally, measurement. You need established frameworks like GRI or SASB to quantify your impact.
The article mentions a specific concept here that I found really interesting, but it sounds a bit technical: double materiality assessment.
Right.
Can we unpack that? Because materiality, that's usually an accounting term, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And historically, businesses only cared about financial materiality. That just asks, how does the changing world affect my ability to make money? For example, if a flood hits my factory, that's financially material.
Right, protecting the asset, self-preservation.
Exactly. Double materiality asks you to look at the other side of the coin, impact materiality. How does your business affect the world? How do your emissions, your waste, your labor practices impact people and the planet?
So it's a two-way street. How the world hits you and how you hit the world.
Perfectly put. And here's the insight. In the long run, impact materiality becomes financial materiality. If you pollute the river today, that's an impact. You get regulated or sued tomorrow, and that's financial. A real strategy maps both of these out to find the issues that matter most.
So once you have that map, what's next? Because knowing what's important is very different from actually fixing it.
Then you move to governance, and this is where most companies fail.
Let me guess. They hire a head of sustainability, give them a desk in the basement, no budget, and tell them to fix it.
That is the classic failure mode, the silo problem. Rumor is very firm on this. Governance requires assigning owners and clarifying decision rights, but more importantly, it requires integration.
Integration into what?
Into the core business functions. Budgeting. Product design. Procurement. I mean, think about it. If your sustainability strategy says reduce carbon, but your procurement team's bonus is tied 100% to lowest purchase price, what are they going to do?
They're going to buy the cheap, dirty option every time.
Every single time. If the strategy isn't reflected in the procurement spreadsheet or the product roadmap, it's not a strategy. It's a wish.
So let's talk about how to actually execute this. Moving from theory to action. The article outlines a few steps, but the first one seems obvious yet difficult. Leadership sponsorship.
It sounds obvious, but it's specific. It doesn't just mean the CEO gives a speech. It means senior backing to unblock decisions. It means allocating resources, actual budget and head count.
Right.
You cannot ask a team to fundamentally change how they operate without giving them the tools or the time to do it.
And who is doing the work here? Is it just the sustainability team?
No, absolutely not. The article advocates for cross-functional teams. This goes back to breaking down those silos. You need a team that includes operations, finance, procurement, and HR.
Why finance?
Because finance holds the purse strings. They need to understand why they are approving a supplier that might be 5% more expensive but saves 50% on carbon taxes later. If finance isn't in the room, the strategy just dies in the spreadsheet.
And HR, what's their role?
HR is critical for what's called employee enablement. You can have the best plan in the world, but if the person on the factory floor or the logistics manager doesn't know how to execute it, nothing changes.
So you need training, toolkits.
Yes, and education. Employees need to know how to turn these high-level commitments into repeatable daily practices.
The article also touches on the social aspect here, a culture of well-being. That feels a little distinct from carbon footprints.
It is, but it's vital. This is the S in ESG. Fair pay, safety, mental health programs, flexible work. Römer makes the case that this directly boosts engagement and retention. A burnt-out workforce is rarely a sustainable one.
That's a great point.
You can't build a resilient company on the backs of exhausted people.
Sustainability applies to your human resources just as much as your natural resources.
Precisely.
All right, let's get to the part that actually convinces the skeptics, the money. We talked about risk avoidance, but what about the upside? How does this actually improve the bottom line?
The article lists very tangible benefits. The most direct one is just cost savings and efficiency. I mean, it's simple physics. If you are energy efficient, you pay less for electricity.
Sure.
If you adopt circular approaches, meaning you reuse materials, you buy less raw material.
So you're protecting your margins. If the price of aluminum spikes, but I'm recycling 50% of my aluminum, I'm less exposed than my competitor who buys it all new.
Exactly. You have built-in resilience against volatility. And then there's CO2 pricing. As governments put a price on carbon, emitting less directly translates to paying less tax.
Can we look at some real-world examples? The article mentions a few big names. Netflix was one that caught my eye, which I have to say surprised me. I don't think of Netflix as an environmental company.
No, but they are a fascinating example of what's called dematerialization.
That sounds like something out of Star Trek.
It basically means doing more with less. Think about Netflix's journey. They started by shipping physical DVDs.
Oh, I remember that.
Plastic discs in plastic cases, wrapped in plastic, shipped via trucks burning diesel.
A heavy physical footprint for sure.
By moving to streaming, they massively reduced their physical resource flows and their logistics emissions. Now, servers use energy, yes, and they have to manage that. But the reduction in physical waste and transport is undeniable. They decoupled their growth from their material consumption.
That's a key concept right there, decoupling growth from consumption.
It is. Then you have Unilever. They are the classic case study. They've worked for years to align their goals with the SDGs, specifically cutting plastic and CO2 across their product lines. But maybe more interesting for the industrial listeners is Holcim.
The cement company.
Yes. Construction. This is a heavy, dirty industry. Cement is a massive carbon emitter. Holcim is innovating with low CO2 concrete and circular materials, recycling construction demolition waste into new concrete.
And why is that so significant?
Because it shows that this isn't just for tech companies. Even heavy industry can and must innovate. In fact, the opportunities for efficiency gains are often greater in those heavy industries.
So for the listener who is thinking, okay, I'm sold on the concept, but I run a mid-sized manufacturing firm, not Netflix. Where do I even start? The article lists some quick wins. What's the low-hanging fruit?
If you want immediate action, look at your facilities. LED retrofits, HVC tuning, just making sure your heating and cooling are actually running efficiently. It sounds boring, but the ROI is almost immediate.
So basic housekeeping.
Effectively, yes. Waste segregation, putting the right bins in the right places, reduces landfill fees, and updating supplier codes. Simply asking your suppliers to adhere to certain standards can start the ball rolling without costing you a dime up front.
And for the more ambitious, the listener who wants to really transform the business, the article talks about business model innovation.
This is where it gets really exciting. We are seeing a huge shift to product as a service.
Explain that one for us. How does that work in practice?
Okay, imagine you sell light bulbs. In the old model, you want the light bulb to burn out so the customer has to buy a new one. That's planned obsolescence.
Right. Volume is king.
In a product as a service model, you sell lighting. You lease the equipment to the customer. You maintain it. You pay the energy bill for it. And at the end of its life, you take it back.
And how does that change the incentive?
Suddenly, as the manufacturer, you want that light bulb to last forever. You want it to be easy to repair. You want it to use as little energy as possible. Your profit motive is now perfectly aligned with sustainability.
That's a total flip of the script. In a circular model, durability is profitable.
Exactly. And that is the ultimate alignment of profit and purpose. You aren't doing it to be nice. You're doing it because a long-lasting product yields higher margins over time.
I love that. It's not just about doing less bad. It's about designing a better business.
Which brings us to the forward-looking conclusion of the piece. The experts argue that we need to move from a mindset of just compliance to one of innovation.
Right. Don't just tick the boxes because the EU told you to.
The real winner isn't the company that just survives the audit. It's the company that uses these constraints to invent better products. Innovation thrives on constraints. If you force your engineers to figure out how to make a product without virgin plastic, they might just invent a better material entirely.
And that leads to financial resilience.
Yes. Aligning your ESG goals with your capital allocation makes a company more resilient to future shocks, whether that's a new regulation dropping in 2028 or a supply chain disruption caused by climate change. If you're already managing your resources tightly, you are ready. You are shock-proof.
The article ends with some advice that I think is very grounding. Start small, measure rigorously, and scale.
It's good advice. Don't try to boil the ocean. You don't need to fix everything by next quarter. Use a phased plan. But, and this is key, measure everything. You can't manage what you don't measure.
If you don't have the data, you're flying blind.
Completely.
And I think the most provocative thought to leave our listeners with is this. In the future, will we even call it sustainability strategy?
I honestly don't think so. I think the distinction will vanish. There won't be sustainability strategy and business strategy. There will just be good strategy. If you aren't measuring your impact, if you aren't optimizing your resources, you simply aren't managing your business well. It's becoming a fundamental part of operational excellence.
That is a powerful place to land. It's not an add-on, it's the operating system.
It really is.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at the future of business. I want to thank you for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast today.
It's been a pleasure to break this down.
If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more insights on the future of work and business efficiency, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to dig into the details yourself, maybe see those frameworks we mentioned, check the show notes. We've included a link to the full article, Sustainability Strategy, Aligning Profit with Purpose in Business by Felix Römer.
It's definitely worth a read.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep learning.